the second lesson this morning, a few lines from the 5th chapter of the Gospel of John. It was because he did things like this on the Sabbath that the Jews began to harass Jesus. But his answer to them was, "My Father still goes on working, and I am at work also." Let us bow for a moment. Lift from us the cares and preoccupations that have dogged our days till now, so that we may come quiet and open to a word of new strength, new health, new life. In the Spirit of Jesus, Amen. A receptionist says, until recently I'd cry in the morning. I didn't want to get up. I dread Fridays because Monday was always looming over me. Another 5 days ahead of me. There seems to be no end of it. Why am I doing this? Yet I dread looking for other jobs. Airline representative comments, "My job is very routine. I hate it with a passion. Getting sick in the morning, I still go to work, feeling, oh God, I've got to go to work." New York model laments, "I feel guilty because I think people should do something they really like to do in life. I should do something else. This is not very fulfilling, but I'm lazy, I admit it." A banker says, "The job is boring. It's a real repetitious thing. I don't notice the time because I could care less about the time. It's always the same. Nothing very exciting ever happens." Or there is this industrial designer, the American dream, that beautiful, ugly dream that we all in some way have. "I wanted to be a key man in industry. Over the years I realized there isn't any key man, that every man, every human is a commodity to be exploited and cast aside. For 30 years I've been a commercial hack." So tomorrow we enjoy a holiday celebrating our labor. And Tuesday we go back at it again, do we not? Cartoon in last week's New Yorker, 2 young women leaving the beach in their convertible, hair flying in the wind. One is saying, "Can you believe it?" A couple of page-turners, one affair, and wham, it's Labor Day again. Did go fast, the summer, didn't it? How is it with you? How do you feel about the job that you go to? And everybody goes to some job. The tasks that await you on Tuesday in home or community or marketplace, the list of things that are to be done. Burst out of bed in the morning enthusiastic, can't wait to get at it, no resistance, no regrets. Well, if so, get down on your knees and thank God. And I think probably most of us can. But could it feel a bit more meaningful as you go at it again, a bit more life-giving? If you encountered someone whose work was his very food, the thing that kept him going, the source of meaning and energy for his days, wouldn't you want to take a second look at him, ask what this might be all about? Well, the disciples are stewing about Jesus. He's been skipping meals. And so they beg him like a Jewish mother, "Master, please eat." To which he responds with words that puzzle them, "I have food to eat that you know nothing about." And they mumble among themselves, "What's going on? Has somebody been smuggling him sacked lunches behind our backs?" Jesus sees their bewilderment and clears up the mystery with these words, "My food is doing the will of him who sent me, finishing the work that he has given me to do." For Jesus, life worth living is a productive life, a life expended on something far larger than himself, the life of real work in accord with the will of God. It's quite astounding how often in the Gospel of John Jesus talks about work. In the next chapter he speaks about all the works that the Father has given him to do. At the end of the story he is talking about having finished his work. And note, Jesus works because he serves a working God. My Father still goes on working. Is that how you picture God? As a worker? Makes a difference whether we see him as idle, inactive, remote, parked on some cloud somewhere, or digging in to make something of us and his creation. That's Jesus' picture. Somewhere along in the early centuries, the church lost this. The church fathers, or at least some of them, began to conceive of the ideal life as the life of contemplation and prayer in silence and contemplation and prayer and leisure, one was somehow closer to God. Thank God, Eusebius says in the 4th century, there are those people who are not up to that, and they have to grub around raising children and farming the land and that sort of thing. But it was clear to the early church fathers, drawing perhaps on the Hellenistic culture more than on the Bible, that the real life was the life of leisure like God enjoyed. Reformers of the 17th century first recovered for us the glory and dignity of ordinary labor as a calling of God. In a particularly memorable passage, Luther insists, our natural reason takes a look at married life and says, alas, must I rock the baby, wash its diapers, make its bed, labor at my trade? What then does the Christian faith say to this, he asks. It opens its eyes. It looks upon all these insignificant, distasteful, and despised duties, looks on them in the Spirit, and is aware that they're all adorned with divine approval as with the costliest gold and jewels. Luther goes on, when a father goes ahead and washes diapers, God with all his angels and creatures is smiling. Not because that father is washing diapers, but because he is doing it in faith. Imagine that, 300 years ago, Luther talking about men washing diapers. And you know, there is a direct line between that faith and my father, also a man of faith, telling me when I was 14 that I must learn how to work. Not in order to survive, but in order to do my duty in life. As a senior in high school, I got a weekend job with a local ABC radio station. The fact that I hosted the Saturday night dance party, spinning records, remember spinning records? I suspect it didn't set too well with my father, the lay leader of our Baptist congregation. But what I think bothered him more than anything else was the fact that I was learning how to make money just talking. Come to think of it. Is that the way we see life, real life in our culture now? Life as labor, creating, producing, giving out to the best of our capacity at whatever age and stage, to the fullest of our own particular gifts, as long as God gives us breath. Not if we're to believe some of the messages coming at us from the commercial world. Advertisers spend millions of dollars, doping us out, reading us as a people, and they find us dominated by the conviction that real life is fun, leisure, the beach, you deserve a break today. The life that is pictured in the modern media is much more one of consumption than production, impulse than duty, fun than responsibility. I'm afraid for many contemporaries, life is no longer a matter of contribution and effort and obligation, seeking to serve a higher will than our own. And this may explain the widespread dissatisfaction with work of any kind, because our feelings about our labor are shaped not so much by what we must do as by how we view what we must do. If we see the daily tasks before us, the chores that are inevitable, as only something to be gotten through so that we can get on to life, the real life of whim and leisure, then we will chafe under them. If we see them as central to the purpose of living, we will bear even the inevitable boredom and drudgery with a little different spirit. But how can we see our work as full of purpose and grandeur, however dull and routine it must be at times? I once said to a doctor friend, it must be very rewarding to you to help people as you do. He said, you'd be surprised how tired you can get of looking down people's throats with a tongue depressor. The work Jesus talks about, invites us to share, certainly doesn't sound like being a receptionist or a model or a creative supervisor or a banker. So how do we get into his kind of work? Hang around the church all the time and serve on committees? God so loved the world that he didn't send a committee. Seek to convert those who have a different brand of religion than we do, head for seminary to become priests and ministers. A story in the Wall Street Journal some time ago told of men and women in the business world who are finding that world unfulfilling and who are now giving it up to enter the ministry. And of course, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that. But it certainly can't be the answer for everybody. And if professional ministry is the work to which we're all called, God help this world. If I had to decide which was more important to civilization, professional ministers or garbage collectors, I would not have any hesitancy about saying, you know what? One layman, by the way, was invited to a banquet at a convention of clergy, only clergy. He said it was the strangest experience he'd ever had, the only layman, quote unquote. He commented he found himself so self-conscious during the meal that when the priest next to him passed the bread basket, he put a $1 bill in it. No, the work that Jesus is talking about, the work to which he gave his life, the work to which he calls us, every one of us, is a work to be done within the framework of the obligations we already face. Whether it be mothering or manufacturing or hospice volunteer or professional career. A work to be done on the basis of our own particular gifts. Some sow, others reap. And what is that work? It is the introduction of the spirit and rule of God's love into the labor and relationships, the disease and darkness, the brokenness and contradictions of this old world. Jesus' work involved and involves the passionate and compassionate struggle to make this world where we are a little more a reflection of what God wants it to be. That's the task for which he was sent. And that's the tasks he invites us to share with each day as we arise, a task we are to share in the midst of carrying out our other labors and responsibilities. So Jesus' work, in a way, gives us a new perspective on our own work. His work invites us to see our work not just as a means of personal survival or an outlet for our own ambitions, but as a participation in God's work in our world. Followers of Christ are invited as they play receptionist and advertiser and model and banker to see the place where they are and the jobs they do and the people with whom they associate as an opportunity to help shape the kind of world that God wants and that Christ came to begin. I'm talking, of course, not just about the so-called employed, but all of us, every human being, even the officially retired, has duties and obligations that are multiple opportunities for contribution to God's kingdom. In fact, most of my retired friends comment that they're busier now than they ever were. And I hope it's not just busyness, because retirement can involve a new freedom and opportunity to do meaningful service for God and neighbor. One retiree says the only difference is you never know what day it is, what time it is, where you're supposed to be, and what you're supposed to be doing. He says it's a little like working for the government. So Christ's work gives us a new perspective on our work, enables us to see our tasks in a little different light, as more than mere paychecks. Seeing them as the place where Christ's Spirit may better reign, the spirit of integrity, the spirit of excellence, the spirit of compassion, the spirit of building and healing. Working the work of Christ does not necessarily mean doing anything different than you're doing right now. It does mean doing it with a different spirit and different eyes, with a different end in view than just getting to Friday, with an eye to the winning of our world to Jesus' way. I'm convinced that the rule of God's will and love in our world is in our day less and less a matter of chatter and propaganda and more a matter of lives lived with His Spirit. The integrity of faith today depends not upon argument and emotional manipulation, but upon real people of faith in Jesus who live productive and caring and disciplined and self-giving and joyous and purposeful lives. The credibility of faith today depends upon men and women who make their workplace, whether it be home or office or shop or street, a place where His work also gets done. Of course, you'll run the risk of mystifying some of the secular minds out there if you manage at all to reflect the Spirit of Jesus. I read a while ago of a young man, determined and purposeful, who was first at the office every morning, last to leave every night, never took a day off, would work through lunch hour if necessary, never complained, was always buoyant and optimistic. And one day his boss called him into the office, and the young man waited with anticipation for what he would say. The boss said, "Jim, I've been watching your work very carefully. Just what the devil are you up to, anyway?" There's a marvelous old legend about St. Francis. Brother Juniper said to St. Francis, "Teach me to preach as eloquently as you can. I'm not good with words." "I'll teach you to preach more eloquently than I," said St. Francis. "Meet me tomorrow and I'll teach you to preach." Brother Juniper dutifully met Francis early the next morning. To Juniper's surprise, they went for a walk. They walked through the marketplace, they smiled at the laborers, they chatted with the merchants, they patted the children on their heads, they helped an old woman carry her wash. They walked. And finally, an exasperated Juniper asked, "Francis, when are you going to start teaching me to preach?" Replied the saint, "Why, we have been preaching all the time." Is there no one with whom you work, no place where you work that does not need an example of a commitment to excellence? Is there no one whom you serve who does not need the impact of graciousness and interest? Is there no one with whom you live or deal who does not need the feel of real honesty and integrity? Is there no one beside you who does not need an encounter with a courageous and hopeful spirit from time to time? There's your work, the work of Jesus. Alec McGuinness, in his book, Bringing Out the Best in People, tells of one CEO who, when asked, "What are you in business for?" replied, "Strangely, I suppose, I'm in business to grow people. People who are stronger, more autonomous, more self-reliant, more competent, more productive, more fulfilled. We make and sell at a profit things people want to buy so we can pay for all this." It's no accident, says McGuinness, that his people worked with energy and fervor beyond just 8 hours a day for food and shelter. And I think he's not far from the work of Jesus. But it need not be on such a grand scale. A man by the name of Marion Ash tells of helping a friend paint a farmhouse some years ago. Because of the quality of the well water, it was doubtful. We carried our own supply. One hot afternoon, we were just enjoying refreshing drinks of ice water and were returning to our work when a boy, maybe 10 years old, rode up on his bike. We saw immediately that he only had one arm. "I live down the road a ways," he said. "Ma sent me up to see if you fellas need some drinking water. If you do, I can go back and fetch it." I started to explain that we had brought water, but my partner interrupted. "You came just in the nick of time, son. A drink of cold water would do wonders for both of us." As the lad got back on his bike, a big grin swept across his freckled face. "I'll be right back," he promised. "You're lucky I came along." "Well, our worries are over," said my friend to him. "We've got another man on the job." For days I wondered why I hadn't answered his question the way my partner did, imaginatively. Why hadn't I recognized the boy's urgent need to be needed? With a few well-chosen words, my friend had transformed a small boy into a confident, growing human being, and our labor into an occasion, momentary though it was, for redemption. And I think he's not far from the work of Jesus. Such a small gesture in the midst of a day's labor really count for much in this world of power. I remember Jesus' words that not even a cup of cold water goes without impact. The great Wallace Spears once wrote, "The success of Christianity does not depend on the brilliance of a few people or dramatically impressive actions. It is rather a tidal wave of accumulative power created by the combined belief and action of countless ordinary people like ourselves, who day by day seek to reflect the Spirit of their Lord as they go about their tasks. It all gathering momentum as it rolls along until it lifts everything in its path to new levels of beauty and perfection." But the reality is we're always, all of us, in danger of losing the sense of the glory in the daily. We can regain it, though, once more, in the face of another year. We can learn to see the place where we are, with new perspective as the place where the most important work in the world gets done. And if we do, we'll discover that, like Jesus, the tasks and chores and duties of each day do become our daily bread, that which makes life meaningful and us powerful once again. Old Henry Van Dyke said it well, I think, "Let me but do my work from day to day in field or forest, at desk or loom, in roaring marketplace or tranquil room. Let me but find it in my heart to say, when vagrant wishes beckon me astray, this is my work, my blessing, not my doom. Of all who live, I am the one by whom this work can best be done in the right way. Then shall I see it not too great nor small to suit my spirit and to prove my powers. Then shall I cheerful greet the laboring hours, and cheerful turn when the long shadows fall at eventide to play and love and rest, because I know for me my work is best. My food is doing the work of him who sent me, and so is yours.